So Don Maruska is the founder and CEO of 3 Silicon Valley companies, a venture investor, and recipient of the National Innovators Award. A master certified coach, he focuses on helping leaders and teams cultivate success in their organizations. Don has appeared on radio and television and delivers keynote speeches and workshops across the country and abroad. Don is based in California and calling in from there today. If you'd like to try out the chat feature, I'd love to hear where each of you are calling in from as well. Next, to introduce Jay Perry, who's also calling in from California, but happens to be from Charlottesville, Virginia. Jay is a master certified coach who helps people to take advantage of business and personal challenges in unique and powerful ways. With a background in professional theater, Jay approaches his work with a sense of playfulness and passion for developing creative communities. I'm sure some of that playfulness will come out in today's call. In addition to coaching and leading workshops, Jay has a personal mission of bringing the benefits of coaching to traditionally underserved and at-risk populations, volunteering his services in jails and prisons. Finally, Jim Kouzes is an author, winning speaker, and according to the Wall Street Journal, one of the 12 best executive educators in the United States. Jim has been thinking about leadership ever since he was an Eagle Scout, selected to serve in John F. Kennedy's Inauguration Honor Guard. After serving in the Peace Corps and teaching school in Turkey for 2 years, Jim realized that he wanted a career that offered him the chance to teach and the opportunity to serve, 2 things he'll be doing today. Jim has devoted his life to leadership development ever since. So we're so honored to have these 3 guests with us today. I want to encourage you during today's presentation to tweet, if you use Twitter, with the hashtag #TalentChampion. Don, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Becky, and we're delighted to have such a great audience today from such diverse locations, and we're seeking really to have this session bring some extremely useful information to you on how you can boost the use of your talent and enjoy doing it. We really have a definition of talent in Take Charge of Your Talent that is the joyful demonstration of your unique abilities in ways that benefit yourself and others. So we don't think of talent just as something that you sell to other people, but it's really your self-expression, your ability to really bring forth what you have in the world. And we want to share with you some fresh insights about that. We want to offer you some concrete actions you can take. And we're totally delighted that Jim Kouzes is going to be sharing with you his decades of research on leadership as it relates to the development of talent and the application of it effectively. And we're so pleased that Jim graciously wrote the foreword to our book because he saw the connections between leadership and talent as we were discussing it and presenting it for our readers. So we're delighted that he's on and very grateful to him. The key that we've found in the surveys we've done of thousands of leaders in dozens of organizations across the country, large, small, and so on, is that there's a huge reservoir of untapped talent, that even the best and the brightest in the high-performing organizations have 30 to 40% of their talent untapped. So we've been on a mission to figure out how to help people make the most of that talent and to enjoy doing it, and to really bring it forward much more powerfully for themselves and for others. So there's really 3 keys that we want to highlight for you. We want to share also with you some research and information that's come about since the book was published. So you're getting some information here today that's beyond what is in the book itself, because we want to give you the latest results of what's happening as people apply it. So there are 3 keys. The first of the keys is to power up your talent story. All of us have some story about our talent. It might read that, well, I could do thus and such, but these following things get in my way. The economy's down. I don't have a supportive boss. I'm not able to develop my talent as quickly as I'd like because I have other obligations. So our stories get caught up, and in many ways we become victims of those stories, where we're viewing ourselves as being at the effect of other people and other circumstances rather than in charge of our own opportunities and potential. So this creates a real challenge for people in terms of being able to effectively manage and bring forth their talent, because what we're learning very interestingly from the neuroscience, and here's an image of a positron emission tomography scan from one of the leading researchers in this field. And if you're trying to figure out the orientation of this, the front of the brain is to the left, and this is an image of a vertical slice through the brain from top to bottom here. And what this positron emission tomography scan is showing is that what the areas in the brain that are highly activated, where the brain is working and very engaged, and that's the parts of the brain that you see in green here. This is the amygdala, the part of the brain that responds when challenged or feeling in a victim circumstance. And that, as we've known for really decades, shoots the adrenaline down into the system and creates the fight or flight or flee or freeze kind of response in people. What we haven't known, though, until this neuroscience imaging has become available is what happens to the rest of our thinking, the rest of our brain activity during those times when we're feeling, like we're out of control in terms of our own abilities and opportunities, where we're feeling like we're a victim, we're feeling constrained, we're feeling fearful of what might be possible for us. And that's what we're seeing here in the rest of the scan. So that's the amygdala, but the other areas that are critical are this is the prefrontal cortex. That's the forward part of the brain. That's like the executive function of the brain that figures out what to do and how to go forward and what would be some good choices. And then the cerebral cortex, the parts of the brain that bring and associate new and fresh ideas together. These are in red in the positron emission tomography scan because they're showing that they're actually areas of diminished brain activity. So our challenge as human beings is just at the point when we're facing these difficulties, we've got the problem of the best parts of our brain shutting down in a self-protective mode, really back to the days of, when a tiger would attack us and we'd decide, oh, we've got to kill it or flee. But today we don't have those kinds of challenges. We have much more subtle and complex ones where we've got to sort through issues, but yet our brain sort of works in that old way unless we override it. It's kind of like the software on your computer. It's got default settings. Unless you override the default settings, it's going to keep doing the same thing that it has been. So what Jay and I have been looking at over the past decade is how can people take action to catalyze a different response in their brains when challenged or when feeling like they're not achieving fully what they want, and what could be the effective tools and techniques to accomplish that. So a key concept in that is really the idea of a catalyst, and we talk about a talent catalyst conversation, a way to continue to keep people in their better thinking and to do that effectively. So the structure of the talent catalyst conversation, which is about 45 minutes, is to really guide people through their hopes, through their opportunities, and into action. So this, if you think of it, is really what the hero story is. Heroes face the challenges, embrace what hopes they have, look for opportunities, overcome obstacles in reaching those opportunities through the actions that they take, and that creates a reinforcing structure. Now, what's been so critical, we found, in creating these talent catalyst conversations and structuring them in very careful ways is that so often our conversations with one another really misguide us. Because we empathize with one another. So if somebody's feeling like they're down and out on their luck, we'll sort of say, oh yeah, I know what you mean. You're lucky to even have a job in this economy, or gosh, with your boss, no wonder it's so difficult. And people try to empathize, but the empathy that they're giving really enables that victim story to continue. So what we've been learning is that having structured conversations that avoid that enabling of our continued victimization and instead guide people into the questions and responses that are going to get them around their hopes and their opportunities and actions are critically important in terms of helping people to shift the thinking from that default setting in their brains, if you will, into their better brain activity. And we're seeing amazing results. This is an example from an international professional services firm doing these talent catalyst conversations. They take about 45 minutes. And as you can see, everyone who was involved found usefulness out of it. Some people found major breakthroughs. And the key thing that they found is valuable was what we call generous listening. Many of you may be familiar with active listening or reflective listening. Generous listening takes it one more step, which is not only mirroring back what somebody is saying so they can see how it sounds and figure out you know, how their ideas are coming together, but moving forward even more to hold for that other person the hopes that they have. Because the antidote to fear, the antidote to being a victim, is really putting forward one's hopes in the world. So that's the base, a little bit of an intro to the first key, and I want to turn now to Jim Kouzes, who in his foreword was highlighting how this idea of taking charge related to a core thing he's discovered in leadership.
Thank you, Don. I really appreciate this opportunity to be on the call with you and Jay and Becky and those who have graciously tuned in. So welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be talking with you. When I was reading the manuscript of Jay and Don's book and was reading the key number 1 on Power Up Your Talent Story, it became very evident to me that there was really a direct connection between that key and one of the truths about leadership. Now, I was on a panel not too long ago with Ken Blanchard and a few other colleagues in this field, and I was answering a question. And the question had to do with some aspect of our research. And I said, well, I don't know what you call something that's been the same for the last 25 years, but, and before I could answer my own question and provide an observation, Ken answered it for me, and he said, I'd call it the truth. There are some things that are just so fundamental that they survive the test of time, and one of those truths is that you make a difference. In our research on leadership, we found that regardless of age or gender or function or industry or tenure in an organization or national background or religion, 9 demographic variables altogether, none of those mattered when it came to the ability to be able to exercise leadership behavior. One of the stories that popped to mind when I was reading this chapter had to do with a woman by the name of Melissa Poe Hood. We met her when she was Melissa Poe, and she related a story to us about when she was a teenager, actually when she was a young girl. We talked to her as a teenager, but when she was a young girl, a 4th grader in Nashville, Tennessee, and she became concerned about the environment. And so she started an organization called Kids Face, Kids for a Clean Environment. And she did that out of her own initiative as a young girl and organized that effort, Kids Face, despite the obstacles, as Jay talked about, as Don talked about, excuse me, that people face when they come to leadership. She saw an opportunity. 20 years later, over 20 years later, she was awarded by the American Association of University Women as a now an adult woman, the Women of Distinction Award for her service in creating Kids Face years before. And in her acceptance speech, she said the following: change does not begin with someone else. Change begins in your own backyard, no matter your age or your size. She said, I had no idea that one simple action could change my life so much. And then she went on to say, you can't look for the man behind the curtain to solve your concerns. Everything you need, you already have. It's all about taking the first step. And I think that's illustrative of what Don and Jay are talking about in Take Charge of Your Talent in the first key. And we found something else building on this research. We asked people in a poll that we did, in surveys that we've done of thousands of people, and Don, if I could see the next slide. We asked people to indicate to us the extent to which certain categories were the ones from which they found their leader role model. So I want you to think about a leader role model in your own life, someone that you admire as a leader. And who might that person be? And then of these categories, we asked people to think about this person and choose from these categories the category that best fit that person. Was that person a family member, brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle? Was that person a teacher or a coach? Someone you met in school, or someone, a teacher you had in school, in grade school, high school, college, or perhaps an athletic coach? Was it a community leader, civic leader, religious leader, a business leader, perhaps a supervisor that you had at work, or was it a political leader, a professional athlete, entertainer, or none of those categories work for you? And here's what we found. For those whose age is 18 to 30, as well as over 30, that the first category of leader role model in their lives was a family member. 46% for those over 30, 40% for those under. For those who are under 30 years old, 26% from teacher or coach and 14% for those over, and then community leader 11 and 8. And then business leader for those over 30 was 23% compared to teacher coach for those under 30. But when we asked people, was this a famous leader, like somebody who makes the cover of Fortune magazine, Wall Street Journal, or was it someone that you knew at work? And everybody said, no, it was my first supervisor. It was somebody who was a manager at work that really showed me that I had more talent than I even thought I had. Now, if you look at those top 4 categories, what's similar about all of them, particularly the top 3? And what's similar about all of them is that they are people we know well or who know us well. My first supervisor, somebody I worked with in the community, a teacher I had at school, a coach of an athletic team, or a member of my family. Notice that for those under 30, business leader was only 7% because you weren't close to them at that time, but then when you went to work it became 23%. The finding leads to this conclusion and fits well with key number 1, and that is that the most important leaders in our lives are those who are closest to us. So Don, if we could have that concluding slide. The question is not then, will I make a difference? The data shows very clearly that you do. That you make a difference regardless of your role, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of function, regardless of education. You matter. You have a positive impact on other people. And then that leads to the question, it's not, do I make a difference? It's, how do I make a positive difference in other people's lives? Thank you, Don, for the opportunity to share that first truth.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, and a very powerful one it is, and I hope that it inspires our audiences as it has inspired Jay and myself to appreciate how each of us can make a difference. And in fact, one of the things we want to do is to see what stake our audience members have in this topic. So we're going to invite you to our first poll here, which is to have you respond to as many of these items in this poll from our audience as are of interest to you, so we can appreciate what stake you've got in this conversation. What are you looking for? What would you like to see come forward for you in this? And Becky, I know you're moderating the questions, so if people have questions, we are encouraging them to use the question function on the webinar. And do you have some questions that are popping in that you'd like to ask while we're leaving the poll open for people to respond?
Sure. So I want to encourage everyone to be answering the poll and also to be entering your questions in the question panel. What I have so far is some insight into where people are calling in from. Today we have some callers from South Carolina, from California, from Vegas, from New York, from Canada, from North Carolina, from Oregon, and the UK, from Massachusetts. A really great group, and we welcome your questions in the question panel now as you answer the poll.
Okay, great.
A few more people are telling me where they're from, Dallas and West Virginia.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we've got quite a few responses here in the poll, so let's take a look at what it's showing and then invite some comments here about it. It's very striking, and I think this really highlights the two focal points of this conversation, which is how people can make more use of their talent, which came through very highly, and how to help others develop. And part of our message in this is that the two are related. So a strong audience for both topics. Anything you'd like to add an observation about the polling question results, Jim?
Well, I find, Don, it's very striking that, number one, 82% I'd like to make more use of my talent seems consistently to be at the top. All of us very much want to make more use of the capabilities we have, and I think that's the key message that we're trying to offer you. And you know, the fundamental place for us that it begins in the research that Barry and I did, Don, is the realization that you make a difference. It's really the most fundamental truth of all. Before you can take charge of your talent, you have to believe that you can have a positive impact on your own life and career. That may sound fundamental, and it is. It's so basic that we often don't think about it, but it is where every opportunity to develop your talent comes from, is that personal belief in yourself.
Yeah, Jim, this is Jay. I just wanted to piggyback on what you said, and especially as you point out that it's the people that are closest to us that have such a strong impact. And people on this call may or may not be making the connections, those people who are parents, and how important modeling is to our children as they grow up. And if what they're seeing in us are people who are frustrated, feel like we're not expressing ourselves fully, feel like we're not using as much of our talent as we'd like, we're not satisfied with our work or just with being an adult, you know, our children actually look at that and say, oh, that's what it is to be an adult, that's what it is to work at a job. That looks really attractive, or it doesn't look very attractive at all. So this is, you know, how you use your talent has a huge impact on the people that are closest to you.
Yeah. Just to reinforce what Jay just said, I was reading just a couple of days ago a study that was written about by Annie Murphy Paul in her blog, The Brilliant blog, and she was commenting on research that shows that parents who read more to their children when they're young, in other words, more words out loud to their children, end up having a positive impact on this later on in life, on the ability of those children to do well in school, but also well in life. And so Jay is absolutely right, modeling the appropriate behavior. And there's another key message there, which is, it's a rhetorical question, but how many of you listening in on this call are family members? That would be all of us. We all are members of a family. That means to someone in your life, there is a very strong possibility that they are looking to you for leadership. They are looking to you to be a role model for them. And so each of us has really an obligation to our families to be the best we can be.
Thank you, Jim. I have a few questions that have been coming in, and I would love to direct some of these. I think this first one might be for any of you. Eddie is asking, what tends to get in the way of developing more of our talents?
Actually, we'd like to hold Eddie's question because the second key is accelerating through obstacles, and Jay's going to be describing some of those and helping to identify what are the ways to get through those obstacles. So we'll pick that up in just a moment.
Okay, so I wanted to share a comment that came in from Brian, who said, you will make a difference. We need to decide how. So powerful a quote, scarily so, in fact. And I definitely agree with that. A couple more questions that have come in. There's two that go together. So Vincent is asking about transforming an ingrained culture. And he shares that recently everyone received a 4% pay increase, and then Unexpectedly, 2 days later, after a brief reprieve, the same comments and complaints resurfaced. So he's asking about how to harvest buy-in to intrinsic recognition. So that's the first part of his question.
Well, let me just offer a quick comment to a piece of this, which is that pay has about 2 to 5% impact on people's engagement at work. It has almost very little impact. So the observation that after a few days all the old complaints started up again is in line with that finding. It doesn't have very much impact at all on whether people will be motivated to work. So you're absolutely right that we have to tap into the intrinsic motivation of people, and that can be done in a number of ways, and I believe Jay's going to speak to that and Don can speak to that later.
Yeah, and I would just add in here, I think this is a sort of an uber cultural question, and that most of what we call organizations are still the 19th century industrial revolution machine model, where the way we look at talent is at a skill set, like you're a particular part in this machine. And you know, if that's the way you're viewed, and if you buy into that, if you become complicit in that model, I think it's just there's I don't know any way to be completely satisfied by being a machine part. I even as an actor, when I tried playing a machine part, it didn't work very well. You know, that an organization is really based on organism. You know, and our notion here of talent is that it's your self-expression, it's your unique abilities, and it's the joyful demonstration. So I'd say that this is one that goes back to each individual, first of all, you know, that you're the one who can make a difference. But it does go back to you expressing yourself fully and not buying into that other model, not being complicit to it.
And I think that's a critical thing that we're trying to highlight is how talent can bubble up in organizations rather than the typical business model of top-down command control. People don't want to be driven like cattle. They want to be able to express what they are able to do, and certainly the up-and-coming generations have that inclination in spades. So figuring out how each person can take charge of his or her talent and harmonize that with others is absolutely critical. So Jay, why don't you carry us forward on responding to Eddie's question about what are the obstacles that come up and how do you accelerate through them?
Okay, very glad to. So I think first of all, what we want to do is position ourselves well with obstacles. And where I'd start is the first notion. I might even call this a truth, Jim, although I don't have all the evidence, but my life says it, and I don't know anybody who this isn't true for, that life is filled with obstacles. And that in fact, if you would try to imagine a life without obstacles, it would be rather boring after a while. That it is indeed the obstacles that demand our talent, it demands our self-expression, it demands that we think. Now, if we do want to express ourselves fully and move forward in our lives, we need to make a choice. Are we going to put on the brakes when we encounter obstacles? Well, that might be wise at some points. There might be some obstacles that are good indicators that we should slow down or even stop. But many of the times, and this relates back to what Don was saying about what we know about brain function, our brain is operating in this sort of dumb protective mode of like, oh, somebody said no, I have to stop. Or somebody told me I can't do that. That means I can't. As opposed to looking at each of these obstacles as the opportunity to wrestle with something, to learn, to grow. And when we do that, it calls for our talent. It calls for us to express ourselves. So when we say accelerate through obstacles, we don't mean just like try to fool it and dodge around it and move quickly forward, which you can, but also to look at it as something you want to dance with, something that you want to get to know and use it to get to know yourself and what more you can bring to the world. So if we move on, Don, we'll see that this is one of the most common syntaxes in the world we've discovered. We've been interviewing people who have other native languages, and in just about every language we've encountered, there is this syntax that goes, I want to, but, or yes, but, in some form or another. And what we want to be aware of, and many of you may already recognize this, is that as soon as we say but, whatever comes next negates everything that came before. So if you say, well, I hope to spend the weekend redecorating my space, but there's this stuff I didn't finish at the office and I have to do it. The tendency is to just negate everything that came before the but. So this is as one general thing. Recognize these buts in our lives. Some of us have very big buts. Some of them are recurring buts. Of course, one of the simplest tricks with this is see what happens when you change the but to an and you begin to see that they are both true or both accurate. I want to redecorate my space, and I have this work I have to finish at the office. How can both of those coexist? How can I create something, some atmosphere, some tool, some arrangement? How can I use my resources in some way so that both of those things can happen? So in this section of accelerating through obstacles, there are three. Oh, there's one slide before that down. I didn't realize that. Thanks very much. This is a company we're actually working with now, and in interviewing them, you'll see that when we asked them whether they had obstacles that stood in the way, nobody said zero. Now, some people more or less had some concern or major concern, but everything that you see in bright colors here were of concern to them, that they worry that they won't realize their hopes, that they'll lose energy, that they'll get distracted and won't follow up. And just sort of, as I'm going through this, check for yourself which of these obstacles is familiar to you. That there's just too much to do, and you're going to need encouragement to stay focused on it. That there are many things that stand in your way. It's not just one thing. That your concerns are so strong that you just you lose your energy. And you're just not sure how to change all of this. So the way we structured in the book and our process in Take Charge of Your Talent is to look at this section of accelerating through obstacles in three different areas. The first we call keep your hopes humming. And that's because when you're present to your hopes, that produces energy, you start looking forward, you engage the parts of your brain that are capable of being creative and innovative and thinking possibility. So you want to do something. You want to use tools that keep you there on a daily basis, on a regular basis. You may need to insert some of these in your daily practices. One we're very fond of that we use is what we call the Take 5. Just spend 5 minutes a day. And whether that's in meditation and journaling and listening to music, looking at pictures and exercising, but whatever it is that keeps you present to your hopes. Another one that someone recently did in a workshop with us is we just have them rewrite their story. So they re-script it. They recognize the story that they've been living under. That's one of my favorite quotes is by the social historian George Gerbner, is that what separates human beings from all other species is that we're the only ones that tell stories and then live by the stories we tell. So if the story you've been telling is not one that keeps your hopes humming, write a new story. This person did this, and it's amazing. This person actually, in the last year, in conjunction with rewriting their story, lost 94 pounds and is now participating in yoga and becoming a yoga teacher and a champion for health and well-being. The second one is what we call grabbing opportunities to grow, is to approach this with a growth mindset. Carol Dweck, in her book Mindset, makes this wonderful distinction between a fixed and a growth mindset. And the fixed mindset, keeps us in place. It says, this is the way I am. So if I can do this, I do it. If I can't do it, I can't do it. That's just the way it is. A growth mindset, comes from this place of, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can do that. What do I need to learn? How will I need to grow to do that? So as you approach these obstacles, as opportunities to grow rather than things to stop you, you'll discover that you do have amazing number of resources. I think Jim may have alluded to this before. What we like to say is you do have all the resources you need to realize your hopes. And if you haven't yet realized them, if you're struggling or you feel stuck, it's either because you haven't identified the resources, or you're not using them fully, or you're not using them as creatively as you might. So some simple tools we offer. First, try the 100 resource challenge. Actually start a list of 100 resources, people, places, and things that you could access to help you realize your hopes. If you only get to 7 the first day, that's fine. Just keep coming back every day and adding when you think of one. Keep going. By the time you get to 100, you'll have either realized your hopes or you'll be well on your way. Now, so we were working with somebody yesterday who pulled out her list, and she was up to 81 and so proud of it. And her eyes were just gleaming just because she was living in this sense of possibility because she saw all the resources she had. Or you can look and see, you know, am I getting as much from my technology as I might? Or I have this person in my life that I've been afraid to ask for more because I thought I'd be bothering them. But it might be something that they would love to do. Can you use more of that? Or do you want to just try a mashup? Take 3 resources at random, throw them together, and see what you come up with. So those become some opportunities to grow. The last one is to challenge yourself to stretch, is to recognize that you're living somewhere between boredom or autopilot and being absolutely frazzled and frenetic. And so what you're looking for is what's that thing that you're not quite sure you can do, that you can reach for, but that is actually healthy for you. Let's move on, Don. We got and you're gonna our skier picture here, because this is an example of, you know, if skiing is something, or imagine your own thing, if you will, something that gets your hopes humming, you know, something that gets you excited, you know, are you going to go out and go skiing? Is there something that's going to stop you? You know, are you going to, you know, use that energy to make sure that you get there no matter what the obstacles is, even if there's not that much snow or you have to go to Vail to go skiing? How are you going to use this opportunity to grow? Are you going to get more resources? You're going to try new skis? You're going to get a new jacket? Are you going to learn new techniques or develop inner qualities that you have to help you? Maybe you want to have more courage, or you want to be more patient as you ski. Enjoy the scenery more as you do it. And you may also want to take this healthy stretch, you know, where you go, I'm not sure if I'm ready for a black diamond, but the bunny slope is a snooze. So I'm going to find the slope with just the right number of moguls, you know, so that it's a healthy stretch for me and I really enjoy the day. So I hope that helps answer the question. It really is changing your whole relationship to what the obstacles are and seeing how they can make you and your talent come alive.
And that relates directly into one of the key truths that Jim has found from his research.
Yeah, thank you, Jay, for sharing that. That last story reminded me of my own skiing experience. And, you know, this message from Jay and Don about challenge is another truth about leadership. If we could see the next slide, Don. In our research, we asked people to tell us their personal best leadership experiences. And so there were a number of leaders whose names appear there on the screen. And then we asked them to tell us the context in which they led. So for Arlene Blum, for example, Arlene Blum, it was first team of all women to ascend Annapurna, and she was the team leader. Or Ward Clapham, a Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Richmond District in Canada, who took on a situation where there was high crime and low morale. Jacqueline Martens and Tuit, who was told to go to the UK operation and restore profitability. And we go on down the list of those names of individuals, and these are just a few of the thousands of case studies of personal best leadership experiences we've looked at. I want you to ignore the names for a moment, just look at the column on the right, the context. First, to do something. You know, high crime, low morale, restore profitability. You got 2 years to turn it around or close it down. There were bare shelves and a rigid team to work with in a situation of opening some bookstores. Become a world-class plant. Too young. You're too young and inexperienced to be a manager. We're going to start a new global initiative. How would you characterize each one of those? As you look at that, the words that pop to mind for the majority of people when they looked at their own cases as well as the stories of others was that in every single case there is some element of challenge, difficulty, adversity, and uncertainty. There's never been a single case in all the thousands that we've collected and analyzed in which someone did his or her best when keeping things exactly the way they are. In other words, we do not do our best, and Catherine Winkle points this out, unless there is some kind of adversity, difficulty, challenge in front of us. So in taking charge of your own talent, you have to tap into this key of turning those uncertainties, adversities, obstacles into opportunities. Great achievements just don't happen when you keep things the same. Change invariably involves challenge, and challenge, it does test you, and it introduces you to yourself. And what Don and Jay help you to do and take charge of talent is learn how to master that frustration, overcome the discouragement, as Jay talked about with regard to the second key. So if we go to the final slide, one of the things that we found is that when constituents experience their leaders as offering them challenge, they are 25 to 35% more engaged in their work. So just by offering people challenge as a leader, you are helping individuals to become more engaged in their work. And the constituents see leaders who do that, offer them more challenge in their work, are 40% more effective in the eyes of their constituents. So when you look at challenge as the crucible for greatness and challenge as opportunity, people become better able to utilize their talents.
Great. Well, thanks, Jim. And so what we want to do is actually get some feedback from the audience about the degree to which people have found their healthy stretch, the thing that's going to challenge them. So we're launching a poll here, and while we're doing that, Becky, we're going to turn to you and see what additional questions have come up. We have a third key to come, so we want to be sure to allocate time for that, but we certainly want to respond to questions that are popping up about the items that people have on their mind while we let the poll finish here.
Sure. I have a question for the group, and Jay, perhaps you want to address this one first. It comes from Richard in the UK, who's saying, do you think it's possible to develop others when you don't yet feel talented in your current role? And he says that he works with many people in leadership or management roles who feel they are hugely underdeveloped in their often new roles.
I would say absolutely, as long as people are maintaining a growth mindset. In other words, you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be the know-it-all. You can be absolutely authentic about where you are on the learning curve. But if you're demonstrating that you're engaged in that and invite other people to be engaged with you, I think that's a great way to lead. And Jim, you may have a comment on that as well.
Well, it goes back to our observation in finding that unless you can move people beyond their current level of skill and ability and have that mindset that they are capable, the first truth that we talked about, that you are capable of learning and developing and growing, that you are capable of leading, that you are capable of leading your own life, that growth mindset, then offering them challenges is a role that all leaders can play. If you imagine for a moment, and this goes back to some work that Jay and Don referred to, and we also refer to in the Leadership Challenge, is work by Mahai Csikszentmihalyi, who talked about challenge and skill. And when challenge is so high that it outpaces our skill, that our skill is low, we get scared, we get frightened, we get nervous, we become anxious, we don't want to engage in it. When skill is so high and is high, but challenge is very low, people get bored. And so as a leader, we have to find that right degree of challenge compared to skill level. And if you're going to raise the challenge somebody is facing, but not raise the skill, it's likely they're going to become anxious and nervous and not interested in taking on the challenge versus someone who is skilled enough that they think they have the capability. So as a leader, we have to look at both those elements, the challenge and the current level of skill people have.
Thanks, Jim. I have quite a few comments on the poll that just came in. I'm going to share them quickly because I know we have more to cover. Lori mentioned that she would change in the first poll question the word bored to frustrated. Quick question for Jim. Rob wants to know what your first slide said. That we pass over that quite quickly. So the second truth that you shared, if you could repeat that for us.
Oh, the second truth is that challenge is the crucible of greatness.
Thanks, Jim. So someone shares that, Carol is sharing that her other to this "have you found your healthy stretch" question is that she's filled with out there ideas that just stay in here. So I think that might have to do with being able to execute on the ideas for the healthy stretch. A couple more comments. One caller says, a combination of energized and engaged, but still overwhelmed with the fact that there's no end to ideas and opportunities. And here's one that doesn't have a question, but I'd love to hear some feedback from each of you. Maeve says she finds it difficult to motivate when when people tell her that they are engaged and working, but then tell their workmates that they are bored and checked out. So how do you handle that mixed message from the people that you're leading?
Sounds like a great one for Jay.
Well, I suspect that if that's the case, and again, I'm not surprised to hear that. There's a level of fear in the organization that hasn't been addressed. So somewhere in here, something needs to come out in the open, and enough safety has to be presented. Now, that can be a difficult challenge for leaders who, again, think they have to put on a bold face and be positive about everything when they're stressed out and are having a difficult time because they have pressure from shareholders or from their board or from their colleagues. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you're not concerned that you might not be up to it. So I think at every level, people need to start telling the truth about where they are. And I think this is an answer to both this and also the previous question from the woman who was the other, is that we weren't built as standalones. We have to really recognize that we need other people to take charge of our talent, to engage with others in some way. So when people get isolated, that's when the fear sets in, or if they think that their little group can't tell the truth. And so it's to break down all of those walls. We see it happening in our federal government right now. There's so much fear in that it's hard for anybody to make a move in any direction. Fear is the enemy.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay. Well, and certainly I think there's an evolving model here, and in fact, one of the companies we're working with, this high-tech company, we talked about, and we've done 1,000 talent catalyst conversations with their employees to help them stimulate their own ideas and to take charge of their talent. And they actually, independently of our work with them, decided to morph their model of leadership in their organization to be one of thinking of their leaders as catalysts, and actually everyone in their organization as being catalysts of others, which means you don't have to be mommy or daddy and have all the answers and tell people what to do, rather to help figure out how to stimulate and support the abilities and creativity and learning of others. And it's been a very powerful way for that organization to move forward and to have the growth in the organizations they're seeking. So we want to quickly cover key 3 here, which is how do you multiply the payoffs for yourself and others. Our key theme is how to translate what you know into some concrete value. And one of the ways that we found very powerful to help people get more of what they want is a simple formula here, which is to think about yourself and your message to the world as a brand. That is a promise that creates a preference for you, a promise that you want to keep for yourself and put out to others, and then how you prove that to other people, and then the opportunities you create. So many people are in a situation where they're sort of saying, look, I've got lots of things I'd like to do, but they're not happening for me. Well, if that's occurring, if there are opportunities that you're not enjoying, that's an invitation for you to say, well, have I been really clear about what I'm looking for, and have I been able to tangibly demonstrate my ability to deliver on that so that people show up with opportunities for me that are in that category and type that I want. So while many people think of brands as being all about corporations and businesses and marketing and Madison Avenue and everything else, the message that we send out to the world about what it is we want and what we promise to deliver and how we're demonstrating that we can be relied upon to deliver that is really key to coming up with those opportunities. And we encourage each of you to be thinking in those terms. Start with the opportunities. That's the easiest place to begin, and say, okay, what message do I need to convey that I want to keep and project and I'm feeling would be representative of myself, and how can I prove that and do that effectively? Now, what we found over and over is that sharing what people learn in the process of developing their talent is absolutely critical. It translates what's otherwise just personal career assets into organizational assets, and that in turn give people room to grow. Google's a great example of this. They have an aspiration to have 20,000 learners and 20,000 teachers. That is everybody to be learning something, and in the process of learning, teaching others. A good example of this is the city of Palo Alto some years back. In doing this work, created their own internal wiki, and 80 people entered 190 different things that they had learned and they thought would be valuable to share with other people in just the first few months. So the whole picture here is, how can we help not only develop our own talent, but also in the process share it with others in ways that benefit ourselves by demonstrating our brand, our message to the world, and also assist others in carrying their talent forward. And that, of course, leads to another truth from Jim and his research on leadership.
Well, thank you, Don. The third truth that became very evident in reading Jay and Don's book was that you can't do it alone. No one ever got anything extraordinary done without the talent and support of others. And you can graduate from the top of your class in the best schools in the world, and you can, reason circles around your brightest peers, solve technical problems with wizard-like powers, and yet if you don't have the support of other people, you are not going to realize the most from your talents. The mandate is really very clear. When we asked people in our research, and we looked at their personal best cases, and we asked them to tell us these stories, one of the other things that popped out for us was that no one ever got anything extraordinary done by him or herself. Don Bennett's a perfect example. One of the early people we interviewed, his first amputee to climb Mount Rainier at 14,410 feet on one leg and two crutches. Now, you'd think that Don, when we asked him, tell us the most important lesson you learned, he would say something like, well, it was my determination, it was my persistence, it was my fitness, it was my own skill and ability, it was my never give up attitude. Well, all of those things were present, but when we said, what was the most important lesson you learned, Don said, you can't do it alone. Those were his exact words. Now think about that. You're a guy that's done something for the very first time. No one has ever done this before. You've tried before and failed and had to do it again because the wind was so strong it blew you down off the mountain at 14,000 feet and you had to go back and do it again. You're 51 years old when you make this happen. And yet the most important lesson is you can't do it alone. Don realizes, like all successful people and people who utilize their talents to their fullest, that you need help and support and coaching and guidance from other people. So the requirement that you work with a talent catalyst to implement the process that Don and Jay have designed is really crucial, and also comes out in the research on exemplary leadership. As I think there's one more slide to this, I just want to tell one last story. My wife and I were in Truckee, California, speaking of heights and skiing, right near the Mount Sierra, right at the foot of the Sierra, and right near Lake Tahoe. And we saw this sign posted on the side of a restaurant at a cafe there in Truckee by the railroad tracks. This building is dedicated to the memory of Ignatius Joseph Firpo. What we have done for ourselves dies with us, but what we have done for others remains and is immortal. Our legacy really is not what we've done for ourselves. Our legacy is what we've done for others. And as leaders, then, to develop the talent of others to the fullest is one of the greatest gifts that we can give to others.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And now we'd really like to invite another poll here, because one of the things that we're hopeful for is that in some small or big way, that this webinar has inspired you in some manner or helped reinforce something that you're already inspired to do. And we'd love to see what that might be, and you can pick as many of these as speak to you about where you are in your journey and what you'd like to do going forward. And Becky, do you have a couple questions that we could answer while folks are responding to the poll? And then we have a couple items, a couple slides to finish off with people before the top of the hour.
Sure. I have a couple comments still that had come in from the last poll and some comments based on the last segment of content. Charlotte says very powerful in response to the recent stories. Just a couple other comments about healthy stretches. Angela shared that her healthy stretch is to always find a learning out of something that's challenging. Tom says that selling his talent to clients seems difficult and lacking tangible fruits. And Jane shares that her other related to the healthy stretch is that she's in the process of learning a new skill, which isn't boring and isn't energizing, but that she's definitely engaged in that opportunity. So a lot of comments coming in.
Okay. I think we'd like to pick up on the one where the person said they're not sure about how to make their talent tangible, because that's a really important one. I think if you start in that case with the opportunities you'd like, then you can work back and say, okay, if those are the opportunities I'd like, what would I need to show to people to have that talent be tangible? So, for example, someone in the story that Jay was describing was discussing how she was taking some yoga classes. Well, that's one thing, but to make it more tangible, she actually got certified as a yoga instructor. That's making the talent more tangible in ways that other people can see and perceive and value more concretely. So there's lots of things that you can do, and we encourage you to do this with someone else. It's a lot easier, frankly, to figure out what your brand is, what your message is that you want to convey to the world, what you're known for, and what you can offer as assets to others in intangible ways. When you talk about it with somebody else, it's just a whole lot easier. We found that people can do it in a few minutes, whereas they might puzzle over it for hours if they were sitting by themselves. I'm interested in Jay and Jim, and any quick comments you have about what you see on these polling results that are coming back.
Well, one of the things that seems like the almost 61% for both talent, tangible, and share it and stretching, it really underscores one other thing that I think is really important for all of us to realize, and that is to become your best self. You have to have a passion for learning. You have to be open to new experiences and open to honestly examining how you perform, and that's evident, I think, in this polling data. We have to have, as Carol Dweck talks about and Jay articulated, a growth mindset. We find in our research, Don, that the best learners make the best leaders. We actually did research on the extent to which people engage in learning and correlated that with how effective they are as leaders. And it was very striking how those who performed at their best also were engaged more frequently in learning activities.
Great. Well, one of the things we certainly want to invite everyone to do is to, and this follows on you can't do it alone theme of Jim's commentary, is that we were invited by our longtime friend and colleague Jim Collins of Good to Great to create as he would call it, a big, hairy, audacious goal. He looked at the work and he said, gosh, you ought to think about how you can get millions and millions of people to be taking charge of their talent and doing that effectively. So our 2020 vision that we invite you to be part of is that by 2020, the 20 million people across 20 countries will have the keys to take charge of their talent, and that we'll be collectively committing 20% of our time and effort to underserved populations like Jay's been doing with prisons, like we're doing with some community groups and others to help share this work. So it's not something we're doing alone. It's not something that we're doing for ourselves. It's something that we're doing because we believe it'll be of value to others more broadly. So let me just turn to Jay and Jim for a closing comment, and we'll conclude this hour. And we want to thank everyone who's participated in the webinar. And Becky, I think you've got some information at the end about how people can access this or share it with other people that you'll be sending out to them in an email so they can share this session with friends, colleagues, family members, people whom they care about. So, Jay, a quick
thank you. I just want to thank you, Becky, for organizing this and setting it up. It's really a pleasure working with you, and Jim, for you being so gracious in supporting these efforts and engaging with it and sort of standing shoulder to shoulder with us as we try to engage the world in taking charge of their talent.
Jim, a comment that you'd like to offer in close?
Just echo what Jay has just said. Thank you. Thank you to Becky, and thank you to the both of you, and thank you for giving us such a wonderful book to guide us on, all of us, in taking charge of our talent. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to share some thoughts.
Great, and I want to acknowledge Jim. It's extraordinary that this is the 25th anniversary of the Leadership Challenge, and it's on the top 10 list in the Wall Street Journal list of books. 25 years, it really demonstrates the authenticity, the research, the depth, and the value of his work, and we're so delighted that we have an opportunity to collaborate with you, Jim. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks for those who have tuned in. I'm seeing a lot of thanks coming in the question panel. So thank you to Don and Jay for sharing your wisdom with us this hour, and to Jim as well. You can get more information about the book Take Charge of Your Talent at takechargeofyourtalent.com, and more about the Leadership Challenge at leadershipchallenge.com. I will be following up with an email and some special offers if you're looking to purchase these books. And thank you again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Becky.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.